Chapter 3. Even after the first year had passed and Mildred's endurance had sunk below sea level, she didn't have a single regret about divorcing Crook. She'd been fired from Diamond Crystal Salt because she'd called in sick too many times in the few short months she'd worked there. It was boring work to Mildred anyway. All she did from 7 to 3 in the afternoon was add a free-flowing agent to the fine-grained salt so it wouldn't cake up from the humidity. It didn't make any sense to her. She always had to put a few grains of rice in her salt shaker when it caked up anyway. So what was the point? It was mostly the kids who'd gotten sick, not her. Bad colds, mumps, measles. Then Frida started her period in the middle of her science class and threw up all over the bathroom floor when she got home. Now Mildred was back out in Huronville on her knees, 6 days a week, cleaning the Hells, Grahams, and Callington's houses. Mildred hated cleaning up behind white folks, behind anybody really. But it was steady work, and most of the time they left her alone in the house, and she was able to work at her own pace. Nobody was standing over her shoulder the way they had when she worked at Big Boys and the Shingle, breathing out commands or hinting at what she should do next. Here she did everything the way she felt like doing it, quickly. One morning, after 6 months of listening to Frida beg her, Mildred let Frida come with her to see the rich folks' houses on the condition that Frida would help her clean, do something besides get in her way. When they pulled up in the Mercury, Frida acted like she was getting out of a limousine. She walked proudly through the oak doors. "Oh, Mama, can you believe this?" Frida asked, as she glided through one room after another. "Just don't touch nothing, girl. This shit ain't fake. Everything in here is real, and it's expensive. We barely had enough gas to get out here, so you know we can't pay for nothing if you break it." Frida promised her she wouldn't touch anything, but as soon as Mildred went about her business, Frida's fingers slid over the bronze and brass and alabaster. She was awestruck. When she heard the vacuum cleaner in the other room, she flopped down in the middle of the white couch and spread her arms across the back. Her bright black eyes scanned the airy room. She tried to guess how high the ceiling was, 15 or 20 feet. A chandelier with at least 5,000 tiny lights glistened in the sun streaming through the tall windows. A fireplace big enough for her to walk in stood in the center of the room. Frida wondered how many times it had been lit, and if they roasted marshmallows or weenies there in the wintertime. What a way to live, she thought. She closed her eyes, let her head fall back on the couch, and imagined 6 of her best girlfriends lying by the fireplace in flannel nightgowns, eating popcorn, and dreaming out loud about their prospective boyfriends. They were having a great time in Frida's house, and how they envied her. They loved her slumber parties because there was always plenty of everything to eat, and her house was always spotless. "Frida, what you doing in there, girl? You too quiet, and I know when you quiet, you up to something. I told you not to touch nothing, didn't I?" "I didn't touch nothing, Mama. I'm coming." Frida walked toward the yellow and white kitchen, where Mildred was running hot water into a tin pail. "I'm hungry, Mama. Can I have something to eat?" "Look in the icebox, girl." When Frida opened the door, her eyes zigzagged across each shelf. She had never seen so much food in a refrigerator. There were pickles and olives, a big leafy head of lettuce, stacks and stacks of lunch meat, and 3 kinds of bread. There was fresh fruit, oranges and apples and grapes. Everything was neatly housed in plastic containers. But there was something so orderly about this refrigerator. Frida didn't feel comfortable about touching anything. Something was missing. It lacked a wholesome smell. She'd noticed it was missing in the rest of the house too. That smell that meant somebody really lived here, tracked up the floors, burnt something on the stove every now and then. There was no smell of heat coming from the radiators or any signs that rubber boots and wet mittens ever dried over them. Her own house smelled rich from fried chicken and collard greens and cornbread, from pine saw and washing powder and Windex and arrow wax, and the little coned incense Mildred burned after she'd finished giving the house a good cleaning. Frida decided she wasn't hungry and closed the refrigerator. Mildred hollered from the living room for her to go upstairs and start cleaning the bathroom. Frida slowly made her way up the winding staircase to the blue-tiled bathroom in the hallway. The towels were folded neatly across the silver racks and looked like they had never been used. The blue bathtub was shining like a satin bedspread. Nothing in here needed cleaning. Frida pulled down her slacks to use the toilet, then remembered her mama told her never to use the toilet when she didn't know the owners. so she put her hands on the seat and let her small behind support itself in mid-air. When she'd finished, she washed her hands, dried them on her slacks, and ran back downstairs. "I'm done, Mama." "Good. You may think we playing house, but I'm counting dollars and cents. All I gotta do now is wax this floor and we through. Look at that pantry over there and get the duster and swish it across the furniture in the front room and dining room, even if nothing looked dusty." While Frida was dusting, the real reason they were there finally hit her. Cleaning. She wondered just how long her mama would have to do this kind of work, until something better came along, like a new husband for her and a new daddy for them, one who could afford them all. When Frida finished, she stood in the doorway watching Mildred work on her hands and knees. She saw the sweat oozing down Mildred's temples, which made her red head rag look like it was soaked in fresh blood. Frida didn't like seeing her mama like this, didn't care how much money she was getting for it. And on the way home, Frida tried to figure out the best way to tell her mama that one day, if she had anything to do with it, she would see to it that Mildred wouldn't have to work so hard to get so little. "Mama, guess what?" she said, as they drove down the winding road along the river. It was a clear fall afternoon, the kind that children are anxious to go out and play in, and come home sniffling and hungry, their fingers too stiff to unbutton their own coats. "What?" replied Mildred, only half paying attention. "I'm gonna be rich when I grow up, and I'm gonna buy us a better and bigger house than the Hells, and you ain't gonna have to scrub no floors for no white folks." "That's what I need to hear, child. I sure wish you was grown now, but you got plenty of time to be worrying about millions of things. Take your mama's word for it. You don't have to worry about me. I know I ain't gonna be on my knees for the rest of my life. I got way too much sense for that. This is what I gotta do right now, so I don't have to ask nobody for nothing. Ain't no sense in me whining like some chessy cat. This ain't killing me. Women done worse things to earn a living, and this may not be the bottom for me." Mildred pulled up to a stoplight and reached for her purse to get a cigarette. The light changed, so she handed the purse to Frida. "Light me a cigarette, would you?" Frida found a pack of Territons. Mildred quit L&M's right after she and Crook had broken up because they reminded her of him, and lit it. Frida thought of inhaling that first puff, but decided against it. She handed it to Mildred. "One thing I do know," Mildred continued, "and you can mark my words, y'all ain't never gonna have to worry about eating. That's for damn sure. It may not be steak and onions and mashed potatoes and gravy, but you won't go hungry. And y'all ain't gonna never be caught looking like no damn orphans either. If I can't give you what you need, you ain't gonna get it. And I don't care if I have to beg, borrow, or steal. Every last one of y'all is going to college. I mean it. All y'all got good sense, and I'm gonna make sure you stretch it to the fullest." Mildred took 2 quick puffs on the cigarette and tossed it out the window. Frida listened intently. She loved it when her mama went off on a tangent like this. "And baby, let me tell you something so you can get this straight. That big fancy house ain't the only thing in life worth striving for. Decency, a good husband, some healthy babies, peace of mind. Them is the things you try to get out of life. Everything else fall in place. It always do. You hear me?" "Yeah, I hear you, Mama," she said. "What'd you say?" "I mean, yes, but I'm still gonna be rich anyway, because from what I see, being poor don't get you nowhere. And just about everybody we know except white people is poor. Why is that, Mama?" "'Cause niggas is stupid, that's why. They think they can get something for nothing, and that God they keep praying to every Sunday is gonna rush down from the sky and save them. But look at them. What it takes is real hard work. Ain't nobody gonna give you nothing in this world unless you work for it. I don't care what they tell you in church. One thing is true, and this is the tricky part. White folks own every damn thing because they was here first and took it all. They don't like to see niggas getting ahead, and when they feel like it, they can stop you and make it just that much harder. But with all that you learned in them books at school, least you can do is learn how to get around some shit like that. Anybody can see through something that's crystal clear. Just keep your eyes open and don't believe everything. Nah, don't believe half the shit people tell you, because don't nobody know everything. Not even your mama, believe me. I ain't gonna steer you too far off in the wrong direction. Mark my words. If y'all just learn to think for yourself, don't take nobody's bullshit, I won't have to worry about you. I don't care if they white, purple, or green. Always remember that you just as good as the next person. How many times I told y'all that? All you gotta do is believe it." Mildred pressed her foot down on the accelerator and the car jutted forward in spurts. They began to see smaller houses ahead. Frida didn't like Point Haven and dreamed of leaving after she graduated. She had no idea where she would go, but she knew that there had to be a better place to live than here. Mildred had never given any thought to living anywhere else. Most people who didn't live within the 75-mile radius had never even heard of Point Haven. It was in the thumb of Michigan, and from 100 feet above, the town would look like a blanket of gray and black stripes spread out beside Lake Huron. Most of the streets were pressed black dirt with rocks still stuck beneath it. There were so many trees and fields that no one appreciated them, except in hot, sticky summers. There were blueberry, blackberry, elderberry, and strawberry patches in backyards and miles of woods. And there was plenty of water, which meant good fishing, something the black folks cherished most about the town. They could never catch enough pickerel, catfish, perch, or sheepshead to satisfy their insatiable appetites for fillets dipped in egg batter and yellow cornmeal, dropped in hot grease and smothered with Louisiana hot sauce. A lot of people had drowned from undertows in the St. Clair River, where they often fished. Folks swore the currents came from Canada, which they could see when standing at the shore. Even when the sanctified preacher put on his white robe and walked through the waves and over stones to baptize people, he wouldn't go out too far. Once he dropped his Bible in the water after dipping Melinda Pinkerton backward into salvation, and a wave clipped his sleeve, sweeping his Bible away. He didn't try to go after it either. There were 3 residential sections in Point Haven. Half of the black population lived in South Park, by the railroad tracks or near the small factories on the outskirts of town. In South Park, there were 5 churches, 1 bank, 2 grocery stores, 1 laundromat, 1 bar, and 4 liquor stores. Coming from Detroit, you reached South Park first, and the first impression people got was that this place looked like a ghost town. It was, full of black ghosts who crept quietly up and down the mostly unpaved streets with no place to go besides the shingle. If you were under 21, there was roller skating twice a week, uptown at the McKinley Auditorium, but this was only in the summer. Uptown consisted of only 3 main streets, which housed stores that sold all the same items, only at different prices. There was no building in the entire town more than 4 stories, except the YMCA and the telephone company. They were 6 stories. There was 1 movie house, 3 drive-ins, 3 beaches, a softball field, and in the fall, football games at the high school. In the winter, there was outdoor ice skating, but everybody's main source of entertainment was TV. Word was that all the rickety houses along 24th Street were going to be torn down to make room for an industrial park. Supposedly, it was already in the planning stages, but the colored people didn't believe this for a minute. They had lived here too long, some for as many as 3 generations. Surely the city wasn't going to tear down the houses that most of them had scrimped and scraped to buy. Where would they go anyway? There was also supposed to be a plan to build a housing project smack dab in the middle of South Park. But this, too, they thought was all talk. After all, nothing had been built in this town since the library and state office building uptown. And that was where white people lived. Midtown was where the so-called in-between black folks lived. These people weren't altogether poor because most of them had never received a welfare check, or if they had, they'd been working steadily enough to consider themselves middle class. Many of them were now buying instead of renting, and there were some white folks scattered in their neighborhood, but everybody called them white trash. As you continued north on 24th Street past Midtown, you began to see aluminum siding, and the houses were set back farther from the street. The front yards became longer and wider, and this was a sure sign you were entering the all-white neighborhoods. There was no name for this area. Directly behind it was the highway, which veered off to the left and led to Strawberry Lane, where middle-class white folks who thought they were upper class lived. The only black folks you ever saw up there were the ones who cleaned houses, raked leaves, or picked up trash. Black people called this redneck country. These white folks didn't actually hate colored people. They just didn't like being too close to them. People like the Leonards, who ran the NAACP chapter, the Colemans, whose house was full of school teachers, or the Halls, who both had PhDs in psychology, couldn't buy a house in this neighborhood without fearing for their lives. Even farther north was the North End. It was only 10 minutes from Sarnia, Ontario. Here was a mixture of everybody: poor, not so poor, middle and upper middle class black and white folk, all of whom considered themselves better than everybody else in town. Half the reading and writing population of the point, black and white, worked in factories. One, Presto Light, was in South Park. They manufactured spark plugs, shocks, and points for diesel trucks and some car parts that were shipped to major car manufacturers near Detroit like Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler. The women usually did day work, like Mildred, and the men worked for the Department of Sanitation, like Crook had. Or they were on welfare. Those on welfare looked for opportunities in all employable cracks and crevices, but once they found jobs, many of them realized that their welfare checks were steadier and went a lot further. So a lot of them stopped looking altogether and spent their afternoons watching soap operas and gossiping.